picture this a small town back in 1946, right after World War II, Texarkana, and there's this new kind of fear that takes hold.
Yeah.
Couples are being terrorized under the moonlight, and everybody's talking about the Phantom Killer.
Right.
And we're going to try to unpack this unsolved case using this document called Texarkana Moonlight Murders.pdf as our guide.
Okay.
So by the end of this deep dive, you'll know the timeline, you'll know the key players, and maybe even have some theories of your own about who this phantom might have been.
Well, what gets me about this case is how it plays on like our deepest fears, right? The darkness, the isolation, the unknown, and the fact that Texarkana is literally split down the middle.
Oh, yeah.
By the Texas-Arkansas state line.
That's crazy.
It adds a whole other dimension to the story. I mean, can you imagine the jurisdictional nightmare for the investigator?
It's going to be insane, right?
Yeah.
Trying to coordinate between two states, multiple agencies.
Yeah.
It just seems like chaos waiting to happen. But let's take it back to the beginning.
Okay.
It's early 1946. Texarkana is this, vibrant twin city.
Right.
But there's this underlying anxiety, like...
Well, yeah, the post-war context is crucial here, right? You've got all these soldiers coming home.
Yeah.
Trying to readjust to civilian life, maybe struggling with, what they saw and experienced overseas.
Right.
And society itself is changing. Women had taken on these new roles during the war, and there's this unease, a feeling that things might never be the same.
Right.
It's almost like the perfect breeding ground for a figure like the Phantom to emerge.
It's like the whole town's holding its breath, waiting for something to happen.
Yeah.
And then on February 22nd, it does.
Oh, boy.
Jimmy Hollis and Mary Jean LeRae, they're parked on the secluded road. It's Lover's Lane.
Yeah.
When they're attacked by a man wearing a white mask.
Oh, wow.
He brutally beats Hollis and assaults Larry.
Oh, my gosh.
It's terrifying, but they survive.
Okay.
But their survival just adds to the mystery. Well, this document mentions how Hollis and Larry gave conflicting descriptions of the attacker.
Really?
Yeah, Hollis thinks he was white. Larry thinks he was a light-skinned African-American.
Wow. So right off the bat, we have these differing accounts.
Yeah.
It raises so many questions. Could it be, just the terror of the moment? Or was the attacker maybe trying to disguise himself?
Right.
Or does this point to something deeper about the biases that might have influenced the investigation?
It makes you wonder, how reliable eyewitness testimony can even be in a situation like that.
Absolutely.
And sadly, this first attack is just the beginning.
Oh, no.
About a month later, March 24th, Richard Griffin and Polly Ann Moore, they're found dead in Griffin's car.
Oh, gosh.
They've been shot execution style.
Wow.
The brutality of this second attack is a huge escalation.
Really?
We're not talking about an assault anymore. This is cold-blooded murder.
Right.
And the crime scene was horrific blood everywhere.
Oh, my goodness.
And the document even mentions that Polly Ann Moore might have been posed after death.
That's a chilling detail.
Yeah.
It suggests a level of control.
Yeah.
Maybe even a sadistic streak.
Yeah, it feels like the Phantom is sending a message.
Yeah.
But what is it?
Exactly.
Then on April 14th, it happens again.
Oh, no.
This time, the victims are Paul Martin and Betty Jo Booker, two teenagers.
Okay.
And the killer takes them from different locations.
So he's branching out.
It's not just that he's getting bolder, but he's expanding his hunting ground.
Right.
And there's another similarity that's really disturbing.
What's that?
Betty Jo Booker's body was also posed just like Polly Ann Moore.
So that's twice now. Is this a signature, a way of taunting the police?
It's terrifying to think about. It's like the killer is growing more confident, more brazen with each attack. And then on May 3rd, the Phantom changes his pattern completely.
How so?
He attacks Virgil and Katie Starks in their own home.
In their house?
A farmhouse outside of town.
Wow, so no place is safe.
It shatters any illusion of safety that people might have been clinging to. He's no longer sticking to lovers' lanes or isolated spots.
Yeah.
He's willing to invade a private residence.
This is a turning point, then.
It is. It's like he's saying nowhere is safe.
Right.
And to make things even more complicated, this time the killer uses a .22 caliber weapon.
Okay.
Which is different from the gun used in the previous murders.
So is it the same killer experimenting with different weapons?
Or is there another player in this deadly game?
That's a huge question.
It's a question that haunts the entire investigation.
Yeah.
It adds to the sense of dread hanging over Texarkana.
Absolutely.
So we have 5 brutal attacks, 8 victims, a town paralyzed by fear, and an investigation that seems to be hitting dead end after dead end.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is. What happens next?
Yeah.
Who are the people trying to make sense of this chaos, and did they ever catch the Phantom?
Well, the investigation itself is a fascinating story, almost as twisted as the murders themselves. You have all these personalities, conflicting theories, and the media frenzy is just amplifying the pressure.
Yeah, that's what we'll dive into next.
Can't wait.
So last time we were talking about those terrifying attacks and how it seemed like the Phantom was, evolving, becoming more and more brazen.
Bolder with each crime.
But did they ever catch him?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
This document really dives into the investigation, and it's a tangled web, to say the least.
Oh, I bet.
You have to remember, these investigators were facing immense pressure.
Yeah.
I mean, the town was on edge. Everyone was a suspect.
Yeah.
The media was breathing down their necks.
Right. It must have been incredibly difficult just to do your job.
Absolutely.
So who were some of the key players in this whole thing?
Well, you got to start with Sheriff Bill Presley of Bowie County.
Okay.
He was the first one on the scene for those initial attacks.
Right.
And then there's Texarkana Police Chief Jack Runnels, a man caught between two states and a whole lot of chaos.
Oh.
Then you have Max Tockett, an Arkansas State Police detective.
Okay.
And Tillman Johnson, a Miller County Sheriff's deputy.
So a lot of different jurisdictions, a lot of different personalities.
Yeah, real mix.
All trying to make sense of these clues.
Exactly.
And of course, there's the Texas Ranger that everyone remembers, Manuel Gonzalez.
Ah, yes.
He's kind of a celebrity figure, right?
Right.
Maybe more focused on his image than the actual investigation.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
It is.
He definitely became the face of the investigation. But there were whispers that he, took credit for the work of others. Whether that's true or not, who knows?
Yeah.
But regardless of personalities, these investigators face some serious challenges.
Yeah, like that jurisdictional mess we talked about before.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
It's hard to overstate how much that must have hampered the investigation.
Yeah.
2 states, multiple agencies, even the FBI gets involved at one point.
Wow.
It's a recipe for miscommunication and missed opportunities.
Absolutely. And then you have the media frenzy.
Oh, right.
Newspapers churning out stories, some based on facts, some fueled by rumors and speculation.
Right.
It must have created a whole other level of pressure for the investigators.
I can imagine.
Trying to sift through real leads.
Yeah.
While also dealing with a public that's increasingly panicked.
Right.
Seeing the Phantom lurking around every corner.
Oh, yeah. They were battling fear itself on top of trying to solve these murders.
Exactly.
And the source material mentions some pretty wild investigative techniques they tried.
Like what?
Teenagers used as decoys in parked cars, roadblocks. Massive reward offers even hypnotism.
Wow, they were really trying everything.
It seems like they were throwing everything at the wall to see what would stick.
And that desperation is understandable.
Yeah.
They were under immense pressure to catch this killer, and the clock was ticking.
Right.
But you do have to wonder if some of those methods might have backfired.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like using teenagers as decoys?
Yeah.
That's incredibly risky.
It is.
You're putting those kids in real danger.
I can't imagine being a teenager in Texarkana at that time.
Oh, no.
You'd be terrified to leave your house.
Right.
But with all that effort, all those resources,
Yeah.
did the investigation ever lead them to a prime suspect?
There's one name that looms large in this case. U.L. Swinney.
Okay, I've heard that name.
He was a career criminal, in and out of trouble with the law for things like car theft counterfeiting.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a really intriguing part.
What's that?
His wife, Peggy, actually confessed that he was the Phantom Killer.
Wow. Hold on, so they had a confession.
Yeah, she even provided details that led police to some of the victim's belongings.
Okay, so why wasn't Swinney convicted?
Well, here's where it gets complicated.
Uh-oh.
Peggy later recanted her confession, claiming that she had been coerced by the police.
Okay.
And without her testimony, the case against Swinney just fell apart.
So he was never charged with the murders?
Not for the murders, no.
But he did serve time for other crimes.
Oh, yeah, you did.
So Swinney goes to prison, but not for the Moonlight Murders. But if investigators had this confession, and they found some of the victim's belongings, why wasn't that enough?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
You have to remember Peggy recanted her confession.
Right.
And that casts doubt on its reliability.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, the physical evidence they found
Yeah.
might not have been strong enough on its own
Okay.
to prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
So it's a legal minefield.
Yeah. And without that confession, the case became much weaker.
So what did the investigators think?
Well,
Did they believe Swinney was guilty?
Two of the lead investigators, Presley and Tackett,
Okay.
they remained convinced that Swinney was the Phantom Killer.
Really?
They pointed to the circumstantial evidence.
Yeah.
The fact that Peggy knew things only the killer could have known.
Right.
And the timing of his arrest, which coincided with the end of the attacks.
Huh.
Some people believe that his long prison sentence for those other crimes might have been, an informal plea bargain, a way to keep him off the streets.
Yeah.
Even if they couldn't directly tie him to the murders.
But officially, the Moonlight Murders remain unsolved.
That's right.
So we have this prime suspect.
Yeah.
But the case is riddled with doubt. Did investigators consider any other leads, any other suspects?
Oh, absolutely. This case was a magnet for theories and potential culprits.
Oh, I bet.
There was Duty Tennyson,
a
young man who left behind a suicide note confessing to 3 of the murders.
Oh, wow.
And then there was Ralph Bauman, an ex-Army Air Force gunner, who thought he might be the Phantom while experiencing what's called a fugue state.
Hold on. Wait a minute. What's a fugue state?
It's pretty intense.
It sounds intense.
It's a rare psychological condition where someone loses their sense of identity. And they can travel long distances without any memory of it.
Oh, wow.
Bauman claimed that he'd come out of one of these fugue states and realized his rifle was missing.
Oh, no.
Which led him to believe he might have committed the murders without even knowing it.
That is wild.
It is.
So we have this potential suspect who might not even remember committing the crimes.
Right.
Did they look into that seriously?
Well, Bauman's story is certainly intriguing.
Yeah.
But without any concrete evidence linking him to the crime scenes, it was hard to take his claims as anything more than just a possibility.
I could see that.
The document also mentions a couple of other potential suspects.
Oh, really?
Like a mysterious saxophone peddler who vanished from Texarkana around the time of the murders. And even an escaped German POW.
Oh, wow. So it seems like everyone was a suspect at some point.
It really does.
It's a reminder that in a case like this, fear and speculation can just run wild.
Absolutely.
Any little detail, any unexplained event can become fuel for suspicion.
Right.
It must have been overwhelming for these investigators. Trying to separate fact from fiction.
Exactly. Drowning in information, much of it unreliable or contradictory. It's a testament to their dedication that they kept pursuing every lead, even when it seemed like the Phantom had just vanished into thin air.
So what happened next?
Did
the case ever cool down?
Well,
did Texarkana ever recover from this reign of terror?
That's what we'll explore in the final part.
Okay.
The Phantom may never have been unmasked.
Right.
But his impact on Texarkana and really on our collective fascination with true crime is undeniable.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And as we'll see, the unsolved nature of this case, it's a big part of what keeps us coming back to it.
I agree.
Trying to piece together the puzzle. And maybe find some answers in the darkness.
Okay, so we've gone through this chilling timeline. A killer seemingly getting bolder with each victim.
Right.
We've talked about the twists and turns of the investigation, the pressure, the suspects, the dead ends. But even after all this time, the big question remains. Who is the Phantom Killer?
It's the enduring mystery of this case, isn't it? Officially, it's still unsolved.
Right.
But you can't deny the impact it had on Texarkana, on how people live their lives.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The document even mentions how some folks started calling it the town that dreaded sundown.
Oh, wow.
Long before that movie came out.
It's a haunting name.
It is.
And it makes you think about, the psychological scars that linger long after the physical danger has passed.
Absolutely.
Can you imagine living in a town where you're afraid to go out at night? Where every shadow could be the Phantom.
The fear must have been palpable.
Right.
People stopped going out after dark. Couples avoided lovers' lanes. Parents kept their kids close.
Wow.
It's like the town itself went into lockdown.
Yeah, I wonder if that shared trauma, that collective fear, if that inadvertently shaped Texarkana's identity in some way.
That's a fascinating question.
It is a dark legacy to bear.
Yeah. Did the murders create a sense of unity, a shared experience that brought people together?
Right.
Or did it sow seeds of suspicion and distrust, turning neighbor against neighbor?
It's hard to say for sure.
It is. But it's clear that the Phantom shadow still hangs over Texarkana.
And then, of course, there's that movie, The Town That Dreaded Sundown, which came out in 1976. It's become kind of a cult classic.
Yeah, it has.
But I've always wondered how accurately it depicts the actual events.
Well, that's the tricky thing about true crime movies.
Yeah.
Especially those based on unsolved cases.
Right.
They often take liberties with the facts,
Yeah.
blend reality with fiction, and sometimes sensationalize events for dramatic effect. And The Town That Dreaded Sundown is a prime example of that.
Okay.
It captures the atmosphere of fear and uncertainty,
Yeah.
but it also adds its own twists and turns.
Right.
So it creates this somewhat fictionalized version of the story.
So it's entertainment, not necessarily a documentary.
Right.
But I'm sure it contributed to the legend of the Phantom Killer.
Definitely. It introduced the case to a wider audience, kept the story alive,
Right.
and in some ways mythologized the Phantom.
And that raises an interesting question. Why are we so fascinated by unsolved crimes like this?
A good question.
What is it about these stories that just grip our imaginations even decades later?
Right.
I think part of it is the mystery, the puzzle that we desperately want to solve.
Right.
We crave closure, especially when innocent lives have been lost.
I agree. There's this human need to make sense of chaos.
Yeah.
To find order in the midst of tragedy. In unsolved cases, they defy that need.
They do.
They leave us with unanswered questions, loose ends, a sense of unfinished business.
And maybe there's also a little bit of morbid curiosity at play.
Oh, for sure.
We're drawn to the darkness that glimpses into the abyss of human cruelty.
Right.
It's unsettling, but also strangely compelling.
Yeah, I think that's part of it too.
Yeah.
These cases, they force us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world we live in.
Yeah, for sure.
They remind us that evil exists, that monsters can walk among us, sometimes hidden in plain sight.
Right.
And that can be both terrifying and strangely fascinating.
Right. So where does that leave us with the Texarkana Moonlight Murders?
Well,
We've explored the facts, considered the suspects, analyzed the investigation.
right.
And yet the central question remains unanswered.
Yeah.
Who was the Phantom Killer?
Right. Was it Ewell Swinney?
Yeah.
Or did the real killer manage to escape justice?
We've given you the pieces of the puzzle.
Right.
Now it's up to you to decide how they fit together.
Exactly.
What stands out to you as the most compelling evidence?
Yeah.
Which suspect seems the most likely?
Right.
Maybe you even want to dig deeper on your own.
Yeah.
Explore those unanswered questions and see if you can come up with your own theory.
Absolutely.
And here's a final thought to consider.
Okay.
If the Phantom were active today with
Yeah.
all of our modern forensics and technology,
Right.
would he have been caught?
Mm-hmm.
Or does human nature, with its capacity for good and evil,
Yeah.
always find a way to stay one step ahead?
It's a chilling thought.
It is.
Maybe some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved, serving as a haunting reminder of the darkness that can touch even the most ordinary of places.
Well, our deep dive may be over.
Right.
But the story of the Phantom Killer, like a whisper in the moonlight, continues to echo through time.
It does.
Keep exploring, keep questioning.
Yeah.
And maybe, just maybe, you'll be the one to finally unmask the Phantom